Welcome to the ins and outs of pillaging. Have you ever wanted to run a pillage that pays more than 300 po per battle? Do you want more challenging content? You like chasing records or leaderboards? You want to know what impacts ramp? You want to get to ulti Bnav? We're going to be going over all of that and more. How you can get battles on a sloop that pay 100k. How you can get battles on a sloop that pay 117k. You can get battles on a Shebek that pay 177k or even more, over 200. Or you just want to go for ulti Bnav, number one Bnav. We'll be talking about everything, so buckle up. What this guide is not about is taking out a Grand Frig off of Admiral Island and loading it up with a bunch of straightliners and letting them go at it. This is more about doing what are normally called elite pillages, although I don't think they have to be so elite. They can just be a little bit selective. You just need people who are going to be playing in the frays, who are going to be focusing up a little bit in the fights and being able to function well enough on their station so that you can perform well in the nav. I want to make this kind of pillaging more approachable to people so that other people can try it. It may seem daunting or complicated or unattainable for you to do these kind of things, but it really does not need to be that high of a bar to be able to have a strong pillage. And my hope is that more people will be willing to try it if they understand it better, and through the course of this video we'll be going through all kinds of scenarios in the setup and the Bnav and getting you everything you need to know to be able to run a successful voyage. The first thing you want to do when you get onto a ship is to, of course, turn off the auto attack and slide this first one, or on the right as far as it goes, the one on the left as far as it goes. Generally, you're going to be fighting brigs, and you grab mercs just in case people leave. You're not going to be using them, but stuff happens. One more thing you can do to set up these pillages is have a stock ship, or just move stock in the first place. The reason you would want to do this is because it's going to be cheaper at a large island like Admiral than it is going to be at Ambush. If you stock a sloop, for example, these might be a little bit overkill, but say you get 80 rum and 400 small cannonballs, you're saving 14,000 if you buy it at Admiral and move it down. You might use a little bit of stock, again, moving the stock down, but it's going to be negligible in the grand scheme of things with how much you're going to be saving. Similar for a bag, you're going to be saving thousands on rum and thousands again on medium cannonballs. And it's not that far of a route to go. The difference on Scrimshaw versus Wissa is actually not high at all. You may not even need a stock ship there. You don't have to move a whole stock ship. You could move, a cutter or something. You don't have to move a Grand Frig full of rum and cannonballs or something. It doesn't have to be massive. These runs don't use that much stock. This is not a hyperspawn Atlantis. One other benefit is that you're going to be winning all kinds of random items. And sometimes you're going to be winning Kraken's blood. Sometimes you're going to be winning allspice and whatnot. It does not sell well at Ambush. It's going to sell much better at a larger island like Admiral or Scrimshaw. I just checked the prices for Kraken's blood at Ambush, and it's buying for about 5.5k there versus Admiral, which is going to be 10 to 11k. So you're better off having a ship to dump all of your stock into as opposed to selling it for really low prices. So you don't have to take it out on every single voyage. You don't want to have 10 Kraken's blood in your hold every time you go out in a pillage. This program is pretty useful for keeping score. It is first-mate.versal.app. Not an easy website to get to, but I'll just post a link down. It's not an official Puzzle Pirates thing, so don't type your credit card information in somewhere. But what it does is tracks the damage you deal. So sloop versus sloop, you can click these things very easily to add damage. I use it backwards. It says player enemy. I use this side as the player. And let's say you're doing sloop versus longship, you shoot them a bunch of times, they're maxed, you got shot twice. You can click copy the score, and then it will paste it out as such. So this is really helpful if you don't have the damage levels memorized for sloop versus warbrig, or you'll know bag versus Shebek quite quickly. But if you're recording it or streaming it or something, it's also useful so people who are watching along can keep track without reading the chat, which is quite small, or sometimes you'll even have the chat covered. Last little setup jobbing point is how many people you should actually go with. So a sloop, this looks weird because I forced it to be dark, so it's not a flashbang on people, but it holds 7 people, and generally you want to have all 7, but maybe you really just can't find a Bnav, or you're really just stuck at 6 for a while. Is it going to be horrible if you go with 6? No, it's totally fine. You can go with 6. Is it going to be better if you go with 7? Yeah, the pay will be higher, the difficulty of the enemy will be higher, it will have a stronger impact on your Bnav rank, but sometimes you can't get 7. Similarly with a bag, sometimes you can't get 18. You're just sitting there stuck at 16, you've globaled 2, 3, 4 times, no one else is coming. That's fine. If you can have somebody on Bnav, you have a merc on Bnav, usually you have 2 on guns, you don't need all 3, then you'll be fine going with 16 or 17. It'll still spawn Shebex in the hard route, it'll still be good for your Bnav rank. You will have a solid pillage with 16, 17, you can grab more people on the way. It's not going to be the end of the world if you go with 16, 17 and you can't quite get there. One other important setup topic is called anchoring, and that's done here. As you'll see, we spot the enemy ship right there, circled in red, and what you want to do then is essentially drop anchor. There's not a button for that, but you just turn the ship around a bunch of times so you get really slow. In this example, I made my screen really large so I'd be able to see what ship it was to make sure it was an SF, but either way the method is similar. You just turn around a bunch so you have 0 speed, and the reason you do this is so that you get attacked far away from the LP so you don't have an LP battle. So you'll notice now I have basically no speed. There's no chance we're going to get to an LP. You want to make sure you're below 50% speed when this happens. So what ship should you be using if you want to run one of these pillages? The main option is going to be a sloop. It's the easiest to fill and go. You need 7 people and you're one of the 7, so you need 6 people. You're not having a consistent nav matchup though. You're going to be against a variety of different ships. If you're an Osprey or a similarly difficult route, it'll be a Fanch, Cutter, Dow, or Longship. And on Wissa, it'll be a Longship, a Bag, or a Merchant Brig. The downside of a sloop is that sometimes the nav can take a long time if you're against a large ship because, you know, a Merchant Brig will take 12 shots to max it. A War Brig takes 15, Shebek takes 21. That's only if you're going for really large fights, but the downside is that the nav takes a long time occasionally. Much easier one is the Bag. It's definitely the best option for pillaging. You have an incredibly consistent nav matchup that's pretty favorable. It's Shebek and it takes only 7 volleys to max, so it's not that much, and it takes them 4 volleys to max you. It's incredibly consistent, you can get used to that, you farm trophies easier, it has higher raw PO, but of course it does take more people to fill. Some honorable mentions is the Fanch. I think if you can get 12 people on a boat, you might as well just go for 18. This is a pretty glass cannon option. You're spawning war brigs relatively all the time, except for the occasional merchant galleon once you get your ramp up in Wissa. And it's a bad war brig matchup because if they do trade with you, you're taking about 40% damage from one singular trade. War brig, I've not actually seen it done. The harder part is, of course, finding 30 pirates. I don't see a downside, but, you know, if you can do it, go for it. And the war galleon is an option. If you somehow fill a war brig, you might as well go up. Honorable mention number 1. And honorable mention number 2 is the war frigate. If you're a botter and you want to get into this kind of pillaging, this is perfect for you. As for the route that you're going to do these pillages on, there's basically 3 main options. You have Osprey, you have Wissa to Beaufort, and you have Tichka to Hubbles. The difference between each of them is really the level of difficulty that you're going for. So the Osprey route is not quite half as difficult, but it's the easiest of these 3, but it still provides enough difficulty where you have to shoot the enemy a bunch of times, but you can win some max battles, you can get to ulti Bnav on it, you can get to number 1 Bnav on it, but it pays less than these other 2. Tichka to Hubbles is comparable to Wissa Beaufort, but it's slightly easier. So in my opinion, if you're going to do Tichka, you might as well do a Wissa pillage instead, but you could ease into it. You know, if it's your first time trying it, I would definitely start an Osprey, feel comfortable with that. Once you're good there, you move up to one of these and give it a try. Someone on the forums back in the day made this difficulty level of which routes are the hardest. So Wissa's 100 difficulty, the max, Tichka's less, Pleiades, Osprey, or less. So I've not actually seen anybody do Pleiades or try it, but it seems comparable to Osprey. One that's not listed as well is Horsehead, and it seems to ramp relatively well, pays similar-ish to Osprey. Just mentioned the pay of these routes. Let's talk a little bit about how you actually get high pay. I just took a screenshot of the Wikipedia here, and let's go through each one. The piracy standings, I don't think actually has a huge impact. I think that's a negligible one. The rank is generally on your pillages should always be versus Imperial, so this one doesn't matter. The route difficulty is also always going to be the same because you're going to be on the same route each time. Number of pirates aboard. I think this is the most important factor of all. If you have a full ship and people don't leave after every battle, that is going to be, and you're winning every battle, that is going to be the key to having a good, well-paying pillage. Leavers do hurt the ramp if they leave after battle 1 and 2. Generally, it seems like if you can replace somebody after battle 3, then it doesn't hurt the ramp that much. So if you can try to find people who can stay for 60 to 90 minutes to do 2, 3, 4 battles, that's going to be your best bet. Amount of Po that has been won in the chest from other battles. I don't think I do long enough pillages to notice this having an impact. Mine are usually 7 battles maybe, and I don't see a difference. It seems negligible. There are some people who do like 10 to 15 battle voyages, and maybe it has an impact there, but I think this one's not that important. Another really important one is how decisive the win was. I don't know if it's a percentage or a raw number, but let's say you win with 1 pirate alive on a sloop versus 7 pirates alive on a sloop. You win with 1, it's going to give you a weaker enemy next fight because it thinks you need a weaker enemy because you only won with 1 person. And your ramp is not going to go up that much. But if you win with all 7, then it's either going to maintain an incredibly high ramp for you or get you up to that point because it's, okay, these guys are really strong, we're going to give them a challenge next fight. So this is where the Bnav score comes in, because it's easier for everybody to survive if it's max O versus max max. So, Bnav score doesn't directly impact the ramp, but it impacts the fray outcome, which impacts the ramp quite a bit. Vessel configuration and duty report, yes, in Bnav. We already went over the specification. You're just going to put on the max difficulty every time. But DNAV, it's pretty important if you can have somebody who gets good or preferably excellent every single time, because it's going to give you the spawn that you set it for. So if you're setting it for max difficulty and you have a good DNAVer, you should be getting those max difficulty fights. It also makes sure that you get fights quicker, and it makes sure that you don't get the type of fray that you're not set for. So if you're set for SF, and you have a good DNAVer, you should only get SF. If you have somebody who's getting fines, there's a chance that you're going to get rumbles. And of note here, rumble and sword fighting have separate ramps. So say you do 3 battles of sword fighting, you win them all, and then you go to do a rumble battle. The rumble battle will pay as if it's your first battle, because it's your first rumble battle. It will not pay as if it's your 4th sword fighting battle. Luck, of course, is always a factor, and size of the opponent's ship. This is interesting because that's how ramp seems to pay. It pays you based on how many pirates the enemies have. So let's look at some graphs. This is the ramp distribution without including battle 1, and the way it's calculated is Po per pirate on your ship. So let's say you win 10,000 Po and there are 10 people on your ship. That is 1,000 Po per pirate. You see, that's the lowest possible thing because that would align about with a straight line pillage, but that's just an easy number. You have these outliers out here as well. These are just attacking red ships, really. We're not going to worry about that right now. We'll come on to that later. But generally, your Po per pirate in Wissa is around 7k. If you're having 7 people on your sloop, and your Po per pirate is about 7,000, then you're going to be getting about 50,000 on your sloop after each victory. Versus Osprey, it's closer to 5 to 5.5k. So you'll be getting around 30, a little bit over 35k. per battle. So that's a sizable difference. But another metric to look at, the pay per enemy pirate. This one has limits and boundaries that we can kind of see pretty easily. This is if the enemy ship gives you 100,000 po and they had 20 pirates, then the payout there would be 5,000 po per NPC. And Wissa seems to be about 4.5k, a little bit under, versus Osprey is about 3.5k. And Tichka is kind of in between. I don't have a lot of data for it though. But what this means is that we kind of know what the maximum ramp is, and that seems to be around 5.5k per enemy pirate. I've only recorded one occurrence of it going higher than that, and that was 5.9k, but there was no screenshot of that. It was just a message. But there could have been a typo or a miscommunication or something on that. But what this tells us is that, let's say you're pillaging on Wissa, and you fight a merchant brig, then you know it's going to have 12 people because every merchant brig on Wissa has 12 people. You know the maximum that it can pay you is 5.5 per enemy pirate, so they have 12. So it's a little over 66,000 if your ramp is maxed out. Considering all of this ramp information, there's one ship that you always want to avoid. It's the bag if you're playing on a sloop. So you never want to be navving sloop versus bag if you can avoid it. Why is that? The bag will almost always have 10 people on it, but it will have a darker ring. And it will have such a dark ring because it has extra firepower, but it has less pirates to compensate that. Since the payout for these battles is based on how many pirates is on the other ship, the bag can never pay more than about 50 to 55k at peak ramp, but you won't even spawn it at peak ramp. So this is a graph of all of the ships that have been fought as a sloop on the Wissa route that I've documented at least, and you'll notice the bag has the lowest average out of all of them, and it has some stinker battles, and it doesn't have that many high ones. It has a few high ones, just a handful, but the majority of them are going to be a lot lower than that, and it is not worth your time. It takes forever to nab those because it takes 12 shots to max it, and it maxes you in only 2 volleys. So it is not worth your time to spend forever against the bag in nav to only get a meager payout. Let's look at some of the top paying battles just to give an example of how this works. So currently the highest paying battle that I've recorded on one of these type of pillages was a hearse pillage on Wissa, a sloop versus a merchant galleon. We'll go more into that later. And it paid 117k with 24 pirates, so that comes out to 16,700 per pirate because there were 7 people aboard, or it comes down to 4,800 per enemy. And if you just glance through this list, you'll see it's all around generally between 4,000 and about 5.3, 5.4. There is this anomaly here, this per deep pillage. Maybe had 71,000 for 12 people, which would put it almost at 6k per enemy. And I know he does like to do a lot of battles in some of his pillages, so it's possible that the consecutive wins does play a factor. I don't know how many battles he had at the time. I mentioned bonus spawns, and I showed a few of them in that leaderboard there, so let's talk about what that actually means. It happens right after you win a battle. There'll generally be a red ship on your chart immediately, or very close to there, within 1 LP of where you are. On Wissa, it'll usually be a merchant galleon or a shebek if you are a sloop. So here we want our battle on the bag, so I check the chart, and boom, there is the red ship. That is our bonus spawn. We know it's ours because people don't usually pillage on the same route as us, and it's red, it's coming right toward us right after we won a battle. And the other kicker that confirms it is when you click on it, it will be Imperial. If there's somebody else pillaging around here and they're not really doing as strong of a pillage as you are, there might be a red ship on the route, but it will not be an Imperial one. It'll just be some random thing. Do not attack it if it's not Imperial. A few other comments about these is that they do not attack you. They will float on by. I think it just makes the ocean look more populous or something if you see a really big red ship floating by. You have to attack them. They'll generally have about 3 times as many pirates as you do, so you have 7 people on your sloop. These guys are going to have between 20 to 30. And since the payout is based on the number of enemy pirates on the ship times whatever your ramp value is at, these are the spawns that make massive payouts possible in BKs. So they can spawn as rumble and sword fighting. In the example that I'm showing here, we spawned a rumble one even though we had been ramping sword fighting. So we don't even touch it, right? It's not worth our time because, again, rumble ramp is separate from sword fighting ramp, so we would be spending forever trying to max this thing and then engaging in a really hard fray with our super low ramp. So if your goal is to go for record-breaking battles and fight these things, it's worth it to target brigs and barbs so you ramp both kind of simultaneously, so you have the opportunity to take SF and rumble BKs and bonus spawns. Also in the Nav, the bonus spawn, at least on a sloop, seems to think that it can win any fray no matter the score, and generally it's right. So it will be ramming into walls a lot to shoot you, to try to get an early grapple. It will not care. You can max it entirely from ram damage alone, like rock ram damage, wall ram damage. But you do have to shoot it a few times, otherwise it will disengage. That happened to us once about 40 turns in. We were maxing them and they just decided to leave. One other way to get incredibly high paying battles is through the BK Expo. And there are a few caveats to it. Every single one of them will bug out in a sense, which means there's not going to be a voice line and it won't count toward the trophy, but you should still do the battle. You'll have to max O them almost all the time though, which isn't that difficult because most of them turn into non-shooters, almost all of them. At least from my experience doing Wissahickons against warbrigs, they are generally non-shooters, so you take your time. It's okay, you can max O them. It's going to be like 7 versus 20-ish, so you do need to max O them. You can't do 2 of them in the same pillage. I've been told that if you do 2 of them, the second one will get you stuck in purgatory basically, and you'll have to wait till the server resets to get your ship back because it will be in the fray or in the Bnav board forever. I've not tried it because I've been told that, so I don't want to go through 2 of them, and it's also rare that you get 2 of them, so just don't do 2 of them. The only thing to consider here is that if you get 1 of them, and say you're doing a whistle sloop and it gives you a merchant brig, you probably don't want to take that one if you're going for a really high battle because it can give you a war brig sometimes. If you're on Osprey sloop, then I think merchant brig is the highest, and you should take those. It has about 16 pirates on it, and it pays really well. One more thing to consider is the BK Expo ramp, the payout for it, is tied to your existing ramp. So, if you've only been doing sword fighting so far, there's no reason you should ever take a rumble BK because the pay will be horrendous because it will treat it as if it's your first rumble battle because it is your first rumble battle. Finally, these BK Expos and bonus spawns, they do hurt your Bnav rank. So if you're going for number 1, you should not be doing them. Otherwise, non-issue. Let's talk now about some Bnav strategy. One of the main things you need to know is what's called the trading phase. A lot of people I think don't know about. And that is for the first 7 turns, the enemy ship, generally 7 turns. There can be some leeway. It's usually not after 7. It can end a little bit before 7 sometimes, but generally after 7 turns have elapsed, the trading phase is over. What the trading phase means is that the enemy ships will try to trade with you quite a bit. They will take moves that will let them shoot you as you would shoot them. So they'll play a bit more aggressively in this period. But after turn 8 and beyond, they'll be able to grapple you. It'll be a move that they're allowed to make. So it gives you openings that you can shoot at them when they're going to be going for a grapple because they won't be shooting at you anymore. So let's look at some examples. Here's a pretty random battle. Let's just play it. It's going to be on 8 times seated. This is turn 1. This is turn 2. We're in turn 3 right now. We're in turn 4. Turn 5. Turn 6. And here we are now on turn 7. So after this turn is when the grapple possibilities begin. And you'll know that it has begun because, see, they're still shooting. And just because the trading phase is over does not mean they're going to stop shooting. All it means is that they will be able to start grappling. This turn will end, and they should be allowed to throw grapples this turn. And you'll know that it's the case because disengage in 3 will show up. So you'll know that we have now exited the trading phase. And here, they're spinning around the whirlpool, and they're about to throw a grapple. Boom. If you see the grapple, you know that the trading phase is over. They will not throw a grapple unless the trading phase is done. What can you do with this? What are certain scenarios? Here in this exact spot, they might go forward grapple. They might go right grapple to the left. Either way, you don't expect them to go for a shot immediately right here because you're in such close proximity that they can get a grapple off on you. So they're generally going to go for that. And there are other differences as well in the nav. Just a general thought process for most navs is thinking, how can the enemy ship shoot me, and what can I do to counteract that, to avoid it? So since I was talking about the trading phase quite a lot, we're going to generally play safe in the early turns. Some people take that to such an extreme that they do not, basically they don't engage whatsoever with the other ship. It's not even that extreme. They don't engage whatsoever with the other ship for the first 7 or 8 turns until that trading phase is over, because the movement is a lot different, a lot more erratic. So for example, here, I'm worried about LFL. LFLF is generally what I'd be worried about. The problem, so say they do LFL. Okay, they're going to LFL. You're going to LRFL. And then you'll be able to hit them. That plays around LFF. Because if you just LRL, you lose to LFF, which maybe they'll predict. The problem, if you do these kind of moves in the trading phase, so you LRL or LRFL here, and they do LFL, they do that, great. What are you going to do the turn after? Because you're going to turn to the right to get out, or you're going to go forward, and they're going to be lined up perfectly to shoot you. So let's see what they actually do in this situation. But those are some of the things that you're considering in the trading phase of how you're going to be moving around. And they did, right? That's what their move was. L, F, L. So we could have LRL. We could have been right here, 2 spaces ahead of them, and put 2 shots in them. Would have been great. This is like turn 3. If they'd be right next to us. But if they were right there, you know, we're going to turn to the right and they're going to put 2 into us, and then we're at 33% damage. And they are only 2 out of 9. So it's an unfavorable trade for you if you go for these kind of attacks early. This is a common situation that you'll find yourself in before or after the trading phase. So in this situation in particular, we're still in the trading phase. So it is quite unlikely that they're going to go RF or RFF directly into you. If it's after the trading phase, sitting here and shooting 8 into them is generally safe. You might shoot 4, and then on 3 you go FL or something to avoid them ramming you. But since we're still in the trading phase, we have to play it a little bit differently. There are 2 common moves that they will make in this situation. I think the more common one is a forward and then a double turn shooting into you on 3 and 4. This works similarly if there's no whirlpool. If I was down here in the opposite spot, then FLL would be the opposite side of that. And it happens, I think, quite frequently. What you might think, if there's no pool there, you could FLF if you're that confident about it and shoot into them. That will work sometimes. The other move here, since we have the pool, is forward, pause, shoot into them, because we know they're going to be turning on 2. There are other safe moves like forward left, and we just avoid the whole situation. If there were no rocks and pool here, you could right. However, since they know that you can forward left forward and shoot into them, sometimes they can hit a right, left, forward, shooting on 2, 3, 4. And if you do forward, left, forward, and they do right, left, forward, you're going to eat 4 shots, and you're going to eat a ram. So it will be disastrous for you. So the move that I end up doing is forward, pause, shoot, because I'm expecting them to do FRR. And it has some risk associated. If they went right, left, forward, then I would have eaten 2 shots here and 2 shots here. And it would have been bad. There's always some risk associated, but you're trying to play into what is more likely. And I think the FRR, FLL version is more likely, but not to the point that I would overcommit and do like an FLF. This is another common position you might find yourself in before or after the trading phase. it's one that you want to avoid during the trading phase because there's basically 0% chance that they would throw a grapple in this spot. So you're going to be eating a shot on one almost all of the time. You're probably just going to turn left, take the 2 shots, and get out of there. You would not want to be in this position. Since we aren't in the trading phase anymore, this spot is a good position to talk about in some detail. There are a lot of moves and options and considerations that go into this turn, actually. Number 1, why are we here in the first place? Did we make a mistake in the last turn, or the turn 2 turns ago or 3 turns ago, to put us in this spot that is 2 places away from a rock and trapped between the ship? Because this is not where we would want to be. If we could be out here more in the open, that would be great. If we could be up here in the open, that would be better. Right now, we are right between a rock and a shebek, so it's not an optimal position. There's basically 2 lines of thinking here, but then there's some caveats. Option A is if they show 3 moves, they're likely to grapple on turn 1 to the left because we're out of the trading phase. So if they're showing 3 moves, we can go forward, get 2 shots off relatively safely, turn left and get out of there, and then we go +2, and it is completely fine. However, they might be showing 4 moves sometimes. If they're showing 4 moves and we do that same move, forward left, if their moves are left forward, then the way the ram mechanics work are that they would end up in front of us here, we would end up turned to the left, and they would either shoot 2 into us or grapple us early before the enemy is max. So that would be disastrous for us. We do not want to make a forward left if they're showing 4 moves. If they're showing 4 moves, we're thinking it's probably LF. There's also just a chance that it is shooting on 1. It's unlikely in this spot, I think, that they're shooting on 1. So if they're showing 4 moves, they're probably moving somewhere, and left forward is a reasonable expectation there. What can we do about that? We can go left, forward, right. We would end up here, facing this direction. If they go left forward, we could go +2 or +4, depending on what turn they do it on, and we'll be out of there pretty safely, because if they left forward, they're going to be here, facing this direction, and we're going to be here facing this way. So what's possible to happen next turn is that they're going to go forward and grapple to the left. We can turn left, forward to get out of there. And it might add a lot of turns to the fight to loop around, but we would see what happens there. We can't predict the future, we just nav based on what we have. There's one other interesting point that is made here that's also a Bnav mechanic that is not well known, and I don't know it that well myself to go into super great detail, but it is known as manipulating or manipping the enemy ship to make a different move. So right now, they're showing 3. Our best case scenario is if we get to do LFR and they LF. So what can we do? We can put a bunch of moves in and hope that it causes them to put a different move in themselves. So right now they have 3 moves in because they think we have nothing, or maybe they're expecting us to put a right in at some point. We put a move in, and suddenly they're doing 4 moves. So this would be a decent LFR angle. However, in this position here, I thought I didn't even see the LF, so I was focused on, I want them to grapple on 1. So what I did, I'm not sure if this is the correct way to manip it, but I clicked through the move a few times, and they did end up swapping back down to 3 at one point. This was actually quite dangerous though, because they could have stuck with the left forward. So this forward left maneuver was a risky move, and I could have just I could have gone LFR once I had them doing 4 moves that turn. One other comment about manipping, it's less likely to work if you LSM them the previous turn, so you wouldn't go for 2 in a row like that. The LSM and then the manip. So in summary, your option here is to A, if they show 3, you can forward left, and you get your +2. If they show 4, you LFR, and you can put 2 to 4 into them if they're doing LF. Best case scenario is you get to put 4 into them if you LFR and they LF. So if you can manip them into doing 4 moves, then that would be ideal for you. However, you can't always guarantee that. There's also one little Hail Mary kind of funny move you can make here. If you're convinced they're going LF, you can actually go right left and full shoot. This move is not recommended. It is dangerous. If it's the first battle and you have strong sword fighters, you can try it, because they could sit here. There's a possibility that they sit, there's a possibility that they left and grapple, so it may not go well. But if they do left forward and you right left, then of course you would go +8 or +6, depending on what they do on turn 1. That is highly risky though, and generally your safest play, the most consistent one, is LFR if they have 4, or FLL if they're showing 3, and or trying to manip them into one or the other. The other broader point is that maybe the ship should not even be in this position in the first place next to the rocks, because that cuts out so many of our options. A lot of the time, if there's no rocks here, left is super safe, left is super safe if there's no whirlpool. But since there's a whirlpool and a rock here blocking us in, something probably went wrong the turn before or 2 turns before to get us into this spot in the first place. So there was a lack of foresight or greed getting some shots or whatever it might be. This example is not that relevant to the trading phase, but it is also a situation that comes up quite a lot. And it's not this turn. Let me speed up a little bit. It is the perpendicular situation here. So there's basically 2 moves that they're going to make. And both of them are a right turn. They're going to turn into you every time. They're not going to turn away from you. They're going to turn into you. The majority of the time, they will expect you to go left in this situation, so turn away from them, and they will grapple away. They will grapple that direction. So they're going to turn right and grapple to the left most of the time. There is a small percentage of the time where they will turn right and grapple to the right, but in this position, your safest move is generally just right, because you know they're going to right, and sometimes they go forward and shoot as well. So if you do right-left expecting them to do an RR or an RL, you could get punished quite heavily. But right is generally a safe move here. Now here, I do right-left, which looks weird because I just said you shouldn't do that, but I'm going to get into the topic of a non-shooter now, which is a ship that does not shoot at all after the trading phase is over. We don't know if they run out of cannonballs, if they didn't put any of the bots on guns. We have no clue what happens or why it occurs, but they don't have cannons. So the ship did turn right, and it did grapple up, as you can see right here, and then it went forward. And normally what they do here is shoot at you, but there is not a single shot coming, and we have to shoot them as well. So more about non-shooters. You don't know when it's going to happen, but if it does, you get to play quite aggressively, and what you need to avoid is actually getting in a spot like this that is perpendicular to them, because the only way you really don't max O a non-shooter is if you get grappled early or rammed in a weird way. But let's look at some more non-shooters. You don't know that they're non-shooters until after the trading phase generally, because they do shoot in the trading phase still. So you have to play the game normally. You might only get one of these maybe once or twice per voyage. It's not that frequent, but it's frequent enough that you should know what it is. I also mostly see it on the Wissa route. I don't see it that much on Osprey. It might have something to do with the difficulty. I'm not entirely sure. But right now we're just playing kind of passively here and getting away from them. There's a lot of moves they could make in this area that shoot us. And you see they are shooting. They just shot one cannonball. In here, I think they shoot another one. Yeah, so they shot a few times. So I know they have cannons. We just kind of play around for a while. And then they start making some odd, erratic moves. Like this, for example, on like turn 6 or something. They take 3 shots. They don't shoot at us. So these non-shooters make really erratic movement because they don't have any cannon. So they're using everything they can to try to grapple you, or they just don't have anything in the first place. So you might be worried they're going to LSM you, they're going to do some odd stuff. You just kind of play really chill, but they're not shooting anymore. The trading phase is over. Because they didn't shoot on that turn right there where they were broadside to us, I'm pretty convinced that they're a non-shooter. And then you can just kind of play the game without getting early grappled, and you should be safe. So enough about non-shooters, let's talk about last-second moves. This is generally something you're going to do in a spot that looks something similar to this. They have no moves in, they have maybe one move in, and you have an angle to shoot them and get out safely. So here, FRF gets 2 shots onto them, and even if I stay there, I can turn right next turn and get out completely free. I will not take any damage, so it's super safe. The only caveats to it are that you cannot do it multiple times in a row. So if they do no moves this turn, and you LSM them, and then they put no moves again next turn, and you LSM them again, they have a high chance of LSMing you in return, or even 0-second moving you so you can't react to it whatsoever. You also want to make sure you do it as late as you possibly can. So that's important to, you know, I'm not dragging these moves over here. I'm double clicking twice to get a forward. I'm triple clicking to get a right, I think. You might even right click to get that. And you're clicking to get your cannons in there. You have to be clicking quite quickly. You look at how much time that I started doing it with. Because if you do it a little earlier, too early, then they'll see you put the moves in and they might react, and then you get shot. Another thing of note here is that when the turn starts, you don't need to immediately put your moves in. Because if you put your moves in right away, you know, maybe you're going to think they're going to do right here, and you're going to have forward, or forward, left, right, or something like that. You put those moves in right away, they're also going to put moves in because you've done something. But if they put no moves in, then you can chill, and you don't need to give them a reason. So around, you know, if they're not putting anything in after the first 5 or 10 seconds, they're probably not going to put any in the entire time, and then you're good to go. But again, be careful about doing this too many times in a row, or even too many times in the same battle. Generally, every other turn is pretty safe, but I would recommend, it only comes up once or twice in a battle anyway, so I would not recommend relying on this. Try to get your moves in relatively early, before like halfway through most of the time, to avoid doing some accidental LSMing. But it's incredibly powerful when you can get it off, because you just get free damage. Further, you want to be considering your positioning on the map as a whole. So we spawned in right here, sloop versus bag, and going to the right could be a little dangerous, because if they do like a triple forward or something, then you're in a really tight spot. You want to try to avoid trapping yourself between the walls, between corners, in these really narrow corridors. You want to avoid those areas completely, and you want to generally play in pretty open areas, because then you can predict what they're going to do with relative accuracy. But if there are some whirlpools and some winds, there's going to be multiple ways that they can get to you, and you may not pick the right one, and you may counter the wrong move and end up getting shot. So here we try to just get to this upper middle area of the map and not fight them down here in a pretty congested area. This applies, you know, all over the place and against most ships. The only time when this doesn't apply is if you're navving against a bonus spawn, such as, you know, the Shebek here. You actually want them near rocks. You do not want to play in the open. You want them near rocks so they will continuously ram into them and take a bunch of damage. So let's see that happen here. So for example, if we were playing out in the open, right, they would definitely not have had a rock to turn into. But this way, they turned into the rock and they effed into the rock. So you got 3.5 damage down there because you're playing in the correct area. This is another relatively common spot that you'll get into. You'll kind of be diagonal like this with one tile between you. And if you are out of the trading phase, then what's likely to happen, won't happen every time, but likely to happen is that they will turn toward you, expecting you to go forward, and they will grapple. So left-right is usually a safe play here. There have been times when I go left-right and I get shot on one. There's also a bit of worry of like RLF, or if it's a smaller ship, RLFF. But usually it's safe to turn left in this situation, and that's what happens here. So we turn left and we get out of there, and let's do a left-right. It's a decent move, because sometimes they will go forward, but if you do too many other wild things here, you may get punished. And that's going to be a wrap. This video is long enough, and before we go into every possible Bnav situation that exists, we're going to stop it here, and hopefully some of the detailed discussion and fundamental ideas that have been talked about here help you figure out other situations that maybe were not in this video. If you find yourself in a confusing spot in Bnav, then there are many people on Discord, myself included, that would be happy to talk about various move options, what shouldn't happen, what they might do, what you can do in that situation, and so on and so forth. There's the main Discord, of course. There's the Trophy Hunter Discord. There will be people in whichever one you're at, probably, who would want to help you. So if you have a screenshot, if you have a video, if you end up doing one of these bonus spawn battles and win a bazillion Po, right, send me a picture so I can put you on the leaderboard. I also want to thank Hearse and Nip Chin for both reviewing a draft version of this video, so I wasn't spreading too much misinformation. I hope this was helpful and insightful, and best of luck. Thanks for watching.